Jerrod Laber is a writer for the National Interest Nonprofit Program Director. He has been writing about this. He has been following this story. He is tweeting at Jerrod A. Laber and is joining us now. Jerrod, welcome. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
President Trump seemingly does not believe, and quite frankly, it appeared after a briefing that was delivered by Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, that there was, if not doubt, there was certainly not the same level of fervor being expressed yesterday by senators. And certainly we haven't heard this kind of condemnation by President Trump. Explain the disconnect that we're seeing right now between the administration especially and both Republican and Democratic senators.
Yeah, I think the disconnect is that the administration believes that Saudi Arabia, for whatever reason, they believe that Saudi Arabia is more important and more sort of, intrinsic to our interests than they actually are. There are long-held ideas in American foreign policy that the Saudi kingdom is sort of a stalwart ally in the Middle East, against, particularly in the war on terror, but also they're essential to, the world's energy interests and things of that nature. And that might have been true, at a certain time in the past. But the fact of the matter is that the world energy markets are changing. There's huge skepticism about how actually essential they are in the fight against terrorism. After all, they often sponsor the Wahhabist ideology that often fuels a lot of this extremism is often sponsored, comes from Saudi Arabia. So they still hold to sort of older ideas about how important Saudi Arabia is. They don't want to upset that balance that they feel.
In a piece you wrote recently, you note maybe it's true that Saudi Arabia was an essential ally to the United States in the past, but it isn't true any longer. I wonder, in the context of the fears about an Iran that might be growing stronger, there is a concern that they would be seeking hegemony in the region, and therefore you need Saudi Arabia's support to counterbalance that. Even Israel has sort of begrudgingly supported Saudi Arabia because they are more fearful of Iran. Give us a sense of how that plays out in a decision like this by the president.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a huge part of it. I think it's misguided. The Iranians and the Saudi Arabians, neither of them are in a position to sort of exert regional hegemony. They both would like to, but the Saudis just don't have they just don't have enough people and the capability to do so. The Iranians, they have a very weak economy and don't currently have the military capability to exert that sort of regional hegemony. So I feel like because of that, the United States can sort of take a step back in this proxy war between the two of them, and not really have to take a side, because neither of them have the ability to exert the influence, the kind of influence that they would really like to have.
Yeah, again, we're talking to Jerrod Laber, who's a writer for the National Interest. Jerrod, there's also this sense that this is not the first time, although President Trump is perhaps being more overt about it, that the United States has been in support of a regime that was not welcoming to human rights, for example. Even President George H.W. Bush, we are remembering him today, but remember that the United States, the sense was that maybe we didn't react strongly enough to the massacres in Tiananmen Square under President Obama. We stood by in Egypt and watched things happen, even though journalists have been killed. There have been many examples of this. But it seems to me that one of the differences is that, aside from the overt nature of President Trump's support for Saudi Arabia, there's more of a concern that this is transactional. In other words, it's all about money from arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Talk more about how much of a relationship the United States has with Saudi Arabia in terms of arms sales, and whether or not President Trump is maybe overemphasizing the importance of that economic relationship to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, definitely. The president way overstates. I mean, Saudi Arabia, of course, is they do get the majority of their weapons from the United States and the United Kingdom and other nations in the West. But the president way overstates the importance and also the sheer numbers. He said there was hundreds of billions of dollars that they purchased from the United States in weapons. It's not hundreds of billions. It's a much smaller number. Probably in the 20 billions and something like that. But yeah, it's also this sort of weird economic theory that weapon sales are like a huge boon to sort of economic growth. And while there are certain defense contractors and whatnot, and who do obviously enjoy being able to sell arms to various foreign countries, it's not like the United States would take a huge, if any, sort of significant economic hit if all of a sudden we were to not sell arms to the Saudis anymore.
Jerrod, how involved are we in that war in Yemen?